Oh, I don't know about you. I'm so glad it's Friday. There's been so much that's been going on this week. It'd be nice to have a little bit of levity. We got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, and yeah, we will get some levity. But first, we got some serious things to discuss, and it is pretty concerning that we learned, for example, that a New Jersey council woman was killed last week. Remember this? She was murdered, shot to death outside of her apartment in New Jersey. Her name was Eunice Dwumfor, a Republican member of the council. But then yesterday, another New Jersey Republican council member was shot and killed exactly 1 week later, this time in Milford, New Jersey, just 20 minutes away from the previous killing of the previous council member. His name is Russell Heller, also shot to death in his car. The suspect in that case ended up killing himself. Now, this might be a workplace situation. We do have two murdered council members 1 week apart, 20 minutes apart in New Jersey. We do not know if this is, quote, political violence or not. No motives have been established. Dwumfor's murder suspect has still not been caught, so we don't know what's going on there. But it does lead to some questions, right, as it should. Whenever a politician is attacked and killed, right, President Biden mentioned Paul Pelosi's attack during a State of the Union, and essentially he blamed Republicans for it with no connection whatsoever. It was good that he mentioned this attack because it should not have happened in San Francisco to Paul Pelosi. He then did denounce political violence in the State of the Union with zero mention of this murder of a New Jersey councilwoman. There has been an increase of attacks, by the way. We should just say it. It's okay to say on Republicans over the past year. And certainly Democrats as well. Paul Pelosi, as I mentioned, being one of them. But here are two recent killings of a couple of GOP political figures. Again, we don't know the motive in these two shootings, but these are not so isolated, these attacks. Of course, there was the leftist shooting of a pro-life elderly canvasser here in Michigan right before the midterms. Republicans have been assaulted while out campaigning. We saw that with Marco Rubio's staffer, who was almost bludgeoned to death because he was a Republican. There was the attempted murder of Congressman Lee Zeldin, a Republican gubernatorial candidate. There was a teenager who was run over and killed by a Democrat because he was a Republican. That was a motive. And not to mention the pro-life clinics that are firebombed and whatnot. What's going on here? Is it just our imagination, or is the political rhetoric possibly contributing to the violence? And certainly, again, it does happen on both sides. It just seems lately it's been more one-sided than the other. Roshini Rajkumar is an attorney, a political strategist, and host of the Crisis Files podcast, and joins us now with all of this. Hi, Roshini. How are you?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, you point out some really bleak situations, very tragic scenarios. And just yesterday, Thursday, a Minnesota congresswoman was attacked in her apartment building in D.C. I don't know if you heard about that, but apparently she was getting into an elevator. Luckily, she had some hot coffee to throw in the guy's face.
Good.
I mean, these are very troubling. These should be troubling no matter to whom they're happening, whether they're politicians or regular people. But I think when you highlight these and these details are just horrific, and it really should cause us to pause and ask, well, what's the security situation? But the bigger picture for me, Tom, is the state of mental health in our country. And what are we doing as individuals as well as politicians, office holders, legislators, to make sure the mental health support is there for people, but also enforcement of various laws so that these types of things don't fall through the cracks?
You know, motive is always important in these things. We got to establish that in order to determine if someone had intent to kill. That's part of the process. And again, these two New Jersey killings, we don't know if it was politically motivated or not, but we have to ask the question. That's okay to do so. Is it reasonable, do you think, to look into political motive, especially when it's dealing with, like you mentioned in D.C., the Minnesota congresswoman attacked in an elevator? And we see these two council members in New Jersey 1 week apart. Maybe it doesn't matter which political party they are, but they are members of the political establishment. That's an okay thing to look into, right?
Absolutely. Audience analysis is very key. And as you very, very astutely point out, intent is important when it comes to actual crimes. And therefore, motive is always something we look at, something law enforcement looks at, as I was poring over the different articles about these different crimes. You're talking about yesterday's attack on the Minnesota Congresswoman. I was looking for that. Okay, who was the suspect? How are they connected? What could possibly have been the motive in this situation? Because you would like to think common sense people don't go around attacking or killing each other.
I'm glad she has some coffee to throw on her attacker because
I know.
and I hope they don't ban coffee now in this country because that's a good way of self-defense. There was a report several months back. This report a few months back, and we covered this here on WJR, that reviewed which political figures received the most social media interaction. And it turned out that the more provocative or the more vulgar or the more inflammatory the tweet or the social media post by the politician or the political figure, the more attention that politician received. So think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Rashida Tlaib or Donald Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene, those types. A lot of likes and a lot of hate. It's very emotional. And that emotion that we look at, how realistic is it to assume that the emotion gets carried over from social media to the real world?
Yeah, I mean, it is a reality because everyone has a mouthpiece and everyone also can get directly to political figures now, as well as sports celebrities and others that have a lot of handlers and security and protection around them. But now every regular person believes, and sometimes rightly so, that they can make an impression and they can reach out, they can communicate, as well as attack. And you would like to think, with social media, that the attack stays on the screen and doesn't go out into real life and involve guns and knives. But it is sad that this happens. And often it is not even the person that is doing some of the vitriol or the positive feedback, posts on social media. It's others who follow those types, right? So that is the other thing here that is very troubling. We need to really look into this, but it is difficult. I mean, the different tech companies that support social media platforms, Congress has tried to regulate. There's a lot of pushback in that sense. And then it also comes down being unfair. How do you regulate that speech on these open forums? So there are a lot of our American values, so to speak, from the Constitution that end up being very much in conflict when you try to keep people safe while at the same time protect freedom of press, freedom of movement, and especially freedom of speech.
Totally. I mean, the First Amendment is absolutely critical. We need to protect that at almost all costs. I agree with that assessment. However, there's something else happening here. There's a manipulation that is going on. I mean, when the president labels an opposition party, as he did, as a threat to this country, that a certain group of American citizens are actually attacking democracy and are dangerous. And I've seen this been repeated many times over on social. I think it was yesterday. There was a post that got, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of shares and retweets that said, if you vote Republican, you are absolutely a white supremacist. You are a danger to democracy and you should be shunned, essentially, is what this was saying. And so what does that do to someone's psyche? Because, I see this 84-year-old woman here in Michigan canvassing the streets, and it becomes, we only have a few seconds left, but she gets attacked. What does that do?
Yeah, I mean, you are very right to point this out. It is super dangerous. I mean, it's almost criminal. I mean, when a politician that has the power of his or her platform goes on television, takes to their own social media feeds, and calls out the other party or calls out a specific member of the other party and says, bad, you shouldn't vote, they're white supremacists, they're KKK, whatever it is, those are what we call fighting words in the law.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech is protected.
Right.
Fighting words are not.
Yeah.
If fighting words lead to violence, then you can be penalized, which means getting charged, possibly going to jail. It is very dangerous. And I remember coming on your show to talk about when the president did that to the other party and what that set into play. It is very dangerous. And what we need to do as citizens is to call out our legislators, go see them, write them letters, send them emails, and say you won't stand for that kind of behavior.
Tell them to stop. We appreciate your perspective as always. Roshini Rajkumar, thanks so much. More to come. Tom. It's 760 WJR.